Hello, it's Chris Cox here from Coda Software. Myself and my colleague Francois Marseille did a webinar last week on the Industrial Internet of Things. We showed a four-step process using just the standard functions and features of Panorama that you could use to integrate and to manage IoT devices within an industrial control environment. That meant that you could have a 100% industrial Internet of Things solution, or you could have a mixed industrial internet with operational technology and IT. So hopefully you'll find that interesting. So please take a look at the webinar that we've got on YouTube. So it's coming up very shortly. So director, run that video. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Cox. I'm the Technical and Business Development Manager here at Coda in the UK. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. This is the next in the webinar series of our Panorama Suite 2020 webinars. Today we're going to be talking about Industrial Internet of Things. And we're going to try and introduce you to some ideas and concepts about how you can use Panorama with IoT equipment and IoT providers, and what we've been doing with some other companies. So hopefully you'll find this of interest in your SCADA applications. So today's program, I'm just going to go through some IoT basics with you so that we just ensure that everybody understands the terminology that we're going to use. We're going to understand some IoT independence using some independent IoT devices in an independent network provider and an independent platform such as Panorama. And then we're going to go through a demonstration which my colleague Francois Marseille is going to do for us. He's going to play several roles during that demonstration. We'll explain about the demonstration before we go through what he's going to do and what you're going to see. You're going to see Panorama used as a 100% IoT platform. We're going to come back to some conclusions and then go to a Q&A session where you can use the chat window just to ask us some questions, and as a team we'll do our best to answer them. Anybody asking a question, then we'll get it to you a written answer also after the webinar. Okay, let's move on. So IoT is basically three elements that make up an IoT system. There are the IoT objects in the field. These are the devices that you place to do some sensing. These are generally referred to as things, hence the concept of the Internet of Things. We're going to refer to these things as objects during our webinar. We're also going to concentrate on how you would use them in an industrial arena. So these things come from manufacturers, and they basically are elements that you can just buy off the internet. And I'll go into some more detail with the next one. These things connect to a network, and there are a whole series of network providers. Sometimes people who provide the objects also provide the networks. But in general, there are some independent network providers that the objects can actually sit on, and you can use that to transfer information to a platform. And a platform would be something like Panorama. So we see Panorama in this instance as a platform. If we look at this concept of objects, networks, and platforms, so in the field, you go and buy a series of sensors. These could be a temperature sensor, for example. We're going to talk about temperature sensors today, but they could be complex devices. They don't have to be just a simple sensor. And in fact, most sensors tend to be multiple sensors in one particular thing anyway. So it's quite often that if you buy a temperature sensor, you would buy also a humidity and a CO2 sensor because they're all combined in one device. These come from independent manufacturers, and as I say, you can go on various websites and you can buy these. So you buy the sensor that you need for the use that you want. So when you look at when you have Panorama and you want to connect to an industrial Internet of Things, the first thing that you think about is what are you going to use these sensors for? And you will start grouping things by a set of sensors. Now, to connect these sensors through to an industrial Internet of Things system, where you would generate a Panorama application, which would be on the Panorama E2 platform, then you would need a network. And the network is not just an equivalent of a piece of wire. It is a radio network in general. And this also comes with a back-end system. The back-end system is a platform. It's a piece of software that the providers bring along in order to handle the data packets from the objects, and also to sometimes process the data at this point. And depending upon the processing of the data would determine what provider you would choose for the usage that you want. So if we look at a uses of a cold chain, so monitoring that some foodstuffs, frozen foodstuffs that have been made in a factory and frozen, that during their transportation with the lorry to the end user through the entire logistics system, you would want to make sure that the food doesn't become above a certain temperature, so it maintains its frozen status. You could do that by taking an IoT sensor and either monitoring the temperature within a lorry, a truck, or you could actually put an IoT sensor on the pallet of food and monitor it. So the use case is very specific to what you want to do, and there's no sort of limit to what you can do with this type of system. So that information would be picked up by the network as the lorry drives round, or as the pallets are taken round and taken through various logistic storage elements. It's the back-end system that would present that data to Panorama. So as a Panorama application, that's what you actually connect to when you generate an industrial Internet of Things, an IIoT. And so you could quite easily have a second application, which is using temperature sensors, just the same temperature sensors that you buy from the same manufacturer, but a completely different use. This time maybe in a building, because you now want your office building to have temperature sensors in. And so you may want the temperature sensor of the office area, of a reception area, or of a meeting room. And so you could build another application with a Panorama. It could be an extension of the first one, or it could be a completely separate application. And in fact, you could use a completely different network provider to provide you that data. And so Panorama can connect to multiple back-end systems, and the back-end system support that we use at the moment, or the provider support that we have, if you've been on the Panorama Suite 2020 first webinar, you know that it's Sigfox, it's LoRaWAN, and it's anything that can deliver MQTT services. So this allows you to build an IoT system. You're not limited to your IoT system, because of course you can actually use Panorama to still connect to your traditional control systems. So you can completely mix IoT, OT, and IT-based systems within a Panorama environment. And for those of you who are on the last webinar with us, where we talked about hypervision, you can then use not just one application, but multiple applications with Panorama, and actually use this in a hypervisory environment as well. Panorama cannot just read from the back end, but Panorama can also write to the back end. So that means that we can write down information. I'm sure you can understand the concept of writing if we're sending commands out. But also it could be configuration information, subscriptions basically, to the back-end system about what the Panorama application wants from it. And so without having to use the back-end providers' configuration tools, you can configure Panorama to do that. And that's the sort of thing that we'll be showing you today, that you can have a 100% IoT operation from within a Panorama application. So I want to step down the discussion now and have a look at what comes through these particular data systems. So I've already mentioned that the IoT objects have one or more pieces of data in them. They could be quite complex. If you think a thing could be a sensor, which is what I've been talking about so far, but it could be a car. And a car has many, many different types of different systems in it. So it could be a simple thing, or it could be a really complex thing. But the way that the system works are generally all the same. And that is that an object in the field transmits on a particular basis, either on a data change basis or on a regular poll basis. It decides that there is some data to be sent to the network provider, and it sends that in a packet. It sends a raw data packet because it doesn't want to send the individual elements, because that takes a lot of transmission time. And the whole idea is that the object in the world of the internet actually is asleep most of the time, and it only transmits when it needs to transmit. And so this makes the battery last a lot longer. So inside the packet is quite a lot of information. And this packet is known as the payload. We'll also consider it as the raw data. So you would have information in there. If it's a temperature sensor, let's just stick with that. You would have the temperature information that it has recorded. And you would also have maybe its signal strength. You would have its battery strength. You would have some other information if it's got a GPS location on it or something like that. It could well send that as well. So the information packet can be quite detailed. The network providers receive that information packet and they send it to their back end. And quite a lot of back end systems decode that. And so what's available from the back end is not the raw data, but the disassembled, the decoded data, which is okay if you want to stick with one provider. But if you don't want to stick with one provider, you want the ability to change your provider, then being able to transmit the raw data packet through to Panorama and allow Panorama to decode the data in much the same as it would do from an I/O system, a traditional style I/O system that you may plug in into the Panorama system. Then basically Panorama has all the tools to do that. And in fact, this enables you to keep an independence and not be tied to just one provider. So we can receive from the back end raw data, which is, if you like, the ideal, because there's a lot of information there that we can handle with Panorama, or you could receive the individual data items. And it's a choice that you will have when you go and choose a provider as to what you want to do. So we see, to keep the independence, then use Panorama as the raw data processor, because we have the data processing routines in Panorama and you can make use of that. We're going to show you now how Panorama can be part of a complete IoT value chain. There are 4 steps to this chain, and we're going to now discuss with you the 4 steps. Within a Panorama system, considering it's going to be receiving raw data, we can first of all declare to the Panorama application what IoT devices we need to be handling within the system. And we can use Panorama at runtime to subscribe this information, so what we want from the field, from the back-end system. We can associate a physical device to this subscription, and basically this allows a choice at a later date of which device you're using, and it allows you to interchange devices in the field. And Francois will be talking a little bit more about that during the demonstration. We can then acquire the data from the back end, we can do the decoding, and we can check that the decoding works. And so as a systems integrator, these are the sort of things that you would want to do. And then as an end user, you would want to add value to the data. And once the data is in Panorama, basically you can do all the things that you're used to doing within a Panorama system. So you can do monitoring and control. You remember, Panorama can read write to the back-end system. you can take the data that you received from the IoT, you can combine it with other data that you're getting from different sources. You can derive data from it like you do already with data from IO systems and PLC systems. And of course, you can transfer that data to be analyzed statistically and to do some reporting on it via Panorama H². So basically, there is a full value chain for an IoT system that we can have within Panorama. We're going to go on with a 4-step demonstration, and I just want to explain a little bit about the demonstration before we go in and are doing it, because we can't put everything on the screen today. So what's going to happen is Francois is going to play one of 4 roles here, one at a time. The first role is as the SCADA configurator. He's going to set up his SCADA application using the information about the sensors that we are wanting to use in the field. These sensors generally come in, or this information coming from the sensor manufacturer with the device. So we have this in electronic format, so we can make the Panorama application understand what the sensors are. Again, going to the next step. This could be done again by the SCADA configurator, or it could be done by the end user, by the maintenance manager of the end user, the person who is maintaining and expanding an IoT application based on Panorama. Again, we would declare what the use would be. So basically, we want to use a sensor. We want to put a temperature sensor in a particular floor of a particular building. We want one sensor to be in the toilet area. We want another one to be in the office area. We want another one to be in the meeting room. And so you declare that a physical arrangement. Then he's going to put his hard hat on, get in his car, take his box of sensors and his smartphone, and become the installation guy. So now out on the site, the guy's going to use his smartphone, and this is a concept that we've developed with some end users. That now you can choose from your box of temperature devices which one you're going to put in the toilet area, which one you're going to put in the office, which one you're going to put in the meeting room. For that matter, you could, if you're going back to that cold chain monitoring, if you're putting a sensor on a pallet, you can then use a smartphone, click, that's the one that's going on this pallet. And you could associate it to a particular pallet, which then had a particular set of food on it. So that's the thing that he's going to do from his location. He's going to make the link through to the sensors. He's going to do the final step that a systems integrator may do, or the maintenance manager might do, and that is check that these sensors are working, that we do have a signal, the data's coming through. After which he will be the end user, and he'll be using the actual data. So they're the 4 steps that we're going to show you, and I'm now going to pass over to Francois Marseille, one of our technical experts, who is going to talk you through the demonstration.
Yes, it's over to me. Hello, I'm Francois Marseille. I'm talking to you from Paris, from Massy. I'm waiting for our webmaster to pass me the control so that I can share my screen. That's there. Okay, so this is the demo that Chris just presented, introduced to you. So I am here. The first step of the demo was configuring the set of sensors. So let's do that. I have here Pano Studio. I have some sensors. In the current application here, I only have a single sensor. And sensors on the IoT provider are usually identified by a long code like this, called sometimes dev EUE, depending on the provider or another name. And they come with each a different code, so that all the sensors of all the customers of the same provider are identified uniquely. So as this value can be used in a property, we can use standard import and export functions from Panorama to declare automatically in an application a list of sensors. So here is the import file that was used to declare the sensor we've just looked at. So it instantiates one Adonis sensor, which is a sensor of this type. It's a sensor that's capable of reading 4 digital I/O. And that's the code of this sensor. And we use the same value as the code of the sensor as a QR code, because as you can see on the sensor, we have added a QR code on it. So that's our end user, when he's with his mobile, will be able to scan the QR codes in order to identify which sensor will be used on a specific location. Okay, so this work of importing new sensor can be done using standard Panorama tools or specific persist development if necessary. And Panorama is then automatically capable of adding to the provider the new sensors, so that they can be then plugged in and used automatically. Okay, so we come back now into the Panorama application at runtime this time. So we have done the first step, which is declaring the sensors so that Panorama knows the sensors and the provider knows the sensors. Now we're going to do the second step, which is configuring the sites where my sensors will be installed. So let's create a new site. Because we are today in Massy, it's going to be the site of Massy. The code, it's something like you could use for the administration part of your company to identify the site. So let's put any value. We now need to locate the site. The reason for trying to locate the site is that we would like that the mobile phone is sorry for that. I need to zoom first. We want to use the function of the mobile that automatically display the view corresponding to your location. So I have zoomed in Massy, that's the Codra office. I click here, so that the GPS coordinates are now obtained from our site. Okay. Next step is declaring the list of sensors that we want to install on this site. Our application is now capable of installing 4 different types of sensors, and the sensor type we're going to install today is the Adonis sensor. And let's say I need to install it in the meeting room number 3. I can just add a new sensor. Let's take another type. This one is a temperature and humidity sensor, and it could be in Office 4. Okay, so this is the list of sensors that my colleague that will drive on site will have to install. So I validate all my data entry, and now my site is ready. And it's the colleague taking his car that will drive on site and have to install the device. So today we're not using the true Panorama mobile application because it's a bit difficult to show you what's on the mobile screen. So we've run this in advance, and we have made some screenshots, and the screenshots are displayed here in the application so that you can have a view of what the mobile app would display. So this is the welcome screen of this mobile app. It waits for being at the right distance from the site, because I've entered the GPS coordinate of the site. Or eventually, you can also use the camera of the phone to scan a code corresponding to the site. It's either way possible. Once the site is identified, it's automatically displayed to the user, where the site recognizes the number of devices it needs to install. You have a list here that can be scrolled to show the different type of sensors that will have to be installed. So the user will click on one of the device or the device he wants to install. He will have to walk to the ground office 2 because that's where he needs to place the sensor. He will install this sensor at this location. We'll eventually be able to change the name of the room. Let's say somebody made a mistake entering the room name, or or the room is locked, so he can put a different name and explain here, well, the room was not open, I couldn't get in. Then he will activate the sensor. Usually these IoT objects need to be activated the first time you use them. It's usually done using a little magnet. You pass the magnet at a specific place on the sensor box, and it makes that the object will wake up and it transmit immediately some information. So the user installing the sensor can place it at a special location where he wants to put the sensor and then activate it and wait a few seconds so that the information comes back on his screen to show him what's the signal strength, what's how the reception is, and he can eventually change the location of the sensor if it's too bad. As Chris said, when the sensor has good communication conditions, the battery will last longer. From the makers, you can see on the websites, they will tell you that it can go from 6 months to 8 years. So the quality of communication is very important to check. Okay, so when everything is correct on this sensor, it can be activated. And the data decoded by Panorama can be displayed on the mobile app, so that the user can also check once he has installed that the input data is working correctly. And when he's completed the installation of that sensor, he can go back to the list of sensors and pick up the next one. Okay, once this step number 3 is completed, you can then use Panorama for gathering information. So this is a Panorama object that lists all the devices which are managed currently by the provider. Right now we have this single sensor. Then you can also you can also use the information in a standard use in Panorama, like displaying trends and alarms from these data. And as Chris explained, you can also exploit the information in Historian. If you decide to send the information to Historian, you can send the information from the raw data, the data measured by the sensors themselves. So this is an example of reporting that we've done with H2 reporting. It corresponds to sensors used to monitor temperature in buildings here in France. So we have different reports. This report will show you your different sensors by type or by site location. When you select a site, it filters automatically the reports so that you can see just the sensors of that site. Or if you select a type of sensor, then your list of sensor is reduced to just the type, the sensor of that type. And when you look at one sensor, it allows you to have the measures that sensor has carried out displayed here. You can also have a different type of information. It's how your sensors are behaving. So here we have the same list of sensors, but this time we look at what we call in the spreading factor in the IoT communications. That is the main communication quality measures. If you have a communication factor 7, spreading factor 7, your battery will last longer, and 12, it's going to be a very short time for life for the battery. And so the same features of filtering apply on these reports. You can check which are the sensors which have good quality communication, which have a low communication quality. And here we have the communication working for the sensor, and this sensor here is already out of communication. And if you check, it was one of the sensors having a very high spreading factor, which is probably the reason why his battery died. You can also check that the network communication is working. This test was done Here, yes. So this is the evolution of the spreading factor in average for all your your sensors. You can then filter them by site and by sensor type. But what you need to understand from these reports is that they can be used both for analyzing the information sent by your sensors, the measures, like classical data you would have gathered from PLCs on your system, but they also can be used to monitor the acquisition done by these IoT objects. Okay, I think that's all for the demo today. So I'm going to hand over to Chris. I just need to find Julien. I think he's going to take over. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Francois, for the demonstration. That was excellent, and hopefully that showed you the sort of thing that you can do with Panorama as a tool. So let's have a look at the 4 elements there that we went through, and just to show you what you need to do them if it wasn't exactly clear from the demonstration, because you can do everything that has been shown there. You can create a Panorama application that can do this. And we've only used the Panorama standard objects. So to do the declaration, you saw Francois use the import-export tool, and he also talked about the more advanced import, which is the persist interface within Panorama. To do the association, we used the Panorama at runtime. We used the Panorama object technology to do that. You saw him in Panorama Studio do that. We used the mobile app, so the Panorama standard mobile app. What you saw in the pictures of the mobile app was mobile views that have been created within the application. And we used a database, an SQL database. We used SQL Express. There's not, lots and lots of data to be held. So the free version of the SQL server's an excellent choice. Excuse me. We used for the acquisition, we used the Panorama E2 server, and we used the decoding functions within the E2 server. Excuse me, I need to take a drop of water. And then to add value, you used all of the standard Panorama functions that you would normally use in a normal PLC type application, which is the Panorama E squared for SCADA and HMI use, or for hypervision use, and the Panorama H squared server and the Panorama reporting, which he showed you the information at the end. And on that sort of added value, he showed you not only the data that came from the field, but he also showed you how you can use that additional data that comes along in the raw packet to understand how you can maintain your installation, your IIoT installation. And so, what are the key points that we want to finish with today? Well, first of all, Panorama is a very, very open and flexible product. You choose operationally what you want to do and whether IoT is relevant to you and what you want to do with IoT. We don't restrict you doing what you want to do within the Panorama environment. And for those of you that are familiar with making different types of applications with a Panorama, will know that. You've seen that we've worked with a number of customers, and we're very, very happy to work with everybody that's on this webinar as well, to actually do a complete industrial Internet of Things based solution. So it's a full Panorama-based solution using the standard features of Panorama. So again, you don't need any additional skills, but obviously you do need a provider and the actual objects. And you can see that we are agnostic with the provider and the objects. And even though I've stated that we currently support the Sigfox, the LoRaWAN, and the MQTT gateways, then basically we are looking to add more. And if you have some different ones to those that you want to use, we're very interested in adding them into the product, because we know there are different actors, different players coming into the market who are bringing different types of technologies, because the IoT market right now is not a mature market. It's an emerging, evolving market. And so Panorama, as a result, is a great platform for anything that you want to do from SCADA, Industrial Information System, IoT. So you can have a 100% industrial IoT application if that's what you want, and you can have a full mix of OT, IT, and IoT. So you can use IoT sensors to actually complement and add value, add more information that you don't want to bring in through the control system, but you want to bring in via a different method. And that will give a much, much richer data set within Panorama for the operators. So hopefully that's given you a very good insight of the world of IoT, where we are today with IoT, what we've been doing with customers with IoT, giving you some ideas of what you can do, and also positioned IoT not just by itself, but also completely in your SCADA. And one thing I want to say that I haven't mentioned so far, and I'm sure somebody will ask in the Q&A, what about everybody has an idea of when it's IoT, it's always cloud. You can see the back end quite often is a cloud service, but the IoT doesn't have to be a cloud service. Panorama, you could run it on a cloud infrastructure if you wanted, and you could have it as a cloud service. Of course, people are doing that. They're running Panorama on Azure or on AWS. You buy the licenses from us, and you look after the infrastructure service. But you can also run Panorama, of course, as you normally do, more traditionally on the premise. So Panorama doesn't have to be a cloud-based service in order to use IoT, and I think that's an important message that I really want to leave you with today. That's why I've left it to the end of the presentation. So you can take any traditional SCADA that you have, an existing SCADA on-premise installation, and you can add IoT to enrich the data set that's in there. So have a think about what you'd like to do around there, and come and talk to us about how you would like to use IoT sensors with your Panorama. Once again, thank you very much for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon on the next webinar. Bye-bye.